Hello everybody, my name is Hellkaiser and welcome to a different type of video today. First off, you might notice the sound quality is a lot better. I found my microphones, so hopefully things can start sounding less like I'm speaking through a tin can. I've always wanted to do a music tier list. I'm a huge metalhead. If you've seen some of my videos, I've talked about bands like Metallica and Slayer and stuff like that before. But I wanted to do a tier list of every first wave of thrash metal albums. And I wanted to do this for a long time. And when I call this thrash metal, I'm talking anything that either contributed to the rise of thrash metal. I'm not going to include everything like Iron Maiden and stuff that was influences. I just mean anything that helped create the genre or is considered on something like Wikipedia to be speed metal or thrash metal, because sometimes it's hard to tell a difference. So, for example, Venom, as you saw, is labeled as thrash metal. Even as early as 1982, is black metal and speed metal. So, and they are known for helping create black metal. Hence, the name of the genre is taken from the album. So they will be included because they are later known for being a thrash metal band, and so they count. The only thing I'm not really including is demos, other than the exception of Hellhammer, because they did 3 demos and 1 EP. They never released an album until like 2008. So they are the exception to the rule. Uh, this is if there's any albums I left out, feel free to comment in the description, and I will try to include them into a later list. I'm not going to promise I'm going to add them on to 86 through 88 because that's a lot of music in that time period. But if I might, if it's just like 1 or 2, and I'll make sure to mention it. But this is all of them that I could find and that I could remember. Uh, so if I left out some really obscure band from 1984 that released 1 album and then never did anything else, I'm sorry. This is just what I, as a fan, since a young boy, about 2009. So when I was about 9 years old, I got into heavy metal music and I started really liking thrash metal around 2010, 2011. So I've been listening for over 10 years, and in 10 years of knowledge, I compiled about half of these, and in the last couple of years, I've discovered the rest. So I'll try to give a brief description of what I know about the bands, and I'll give a reason as to why I ranked them. But this is just my opinions, and this is not, I'm not in no way a certified music critic. I'm just a fan who's listened to a lot of music and wanted to share some of my opinions with you. Now, the ranking scale. S is masterpiece. That's genre defining albums or significant albums and within the genre. So you can kind of tell where some of these are going to go, but you might be surprised by a couple of them. And so here we go. Let's start the list. Oh, and by the way, A is above average, quality record, but not exactly a masterpiece or didn't really define the genre in certain ways. B is good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a bad album, but it's not exactly a favorite of mine. C is below average. There might be a couple standout songs, or it might be a solid album, but it's not nothing particularly important to the development of the genre. It's just an album within it, or just okay. And then D tier is either things I've not heard enough to make an opinion on, or just really bad. And that doesn't just mean in terms of lyrics and musicianship, that might just mean in terms of quality. So now let's start off with the one everybody probably knows the best, Metallica. Kill 'Em All. This was the original thrash metal album. Now, some of you might argue that there's other things that's been around longer, other bands that's been doing it longer, but this was the first one to come out that was officially labeled a thrash metal album. So it takes the cake. Okay, I'm trying to find. I think I'm missing. Yeah, I am missing. Hang on. Edit. we go. Left out Overkill. Don't know how I could have done that. Okay, as I was saying, Metallica's Kill 'Em All. This is the original thrash metal album, and in my opinion, a masterpiece of an album. Realistically, the first 5 Metallica albums are all masterpieces. You can't really find much to criticize about any of them unless you're just really nitpicky. In terms of musicianship, in terms of songwriting, in terms of lyrics, in terms of instrumental, it's perfect. The original album is not as sharp and not as well written lyrically or instrumentally as the follow up album, Ride the Lightning, or any of the later albums, but it's got this rawness to it that really defined the genre as a whole. Every song on the album makes you want to bang your head against a brick wall, and it succeeds in just that mosh pit mentality that the band wanted to make and that set the standard. You know, to this day, songs like Whiplash and Seek and Destroy and the Four Horsemen remain staples in live shows. Not so much Whiplash, but definitely Seek and Destroy and the Four Horsemen. Fans love it when they go back and pull some songs from the old albums, especially this one. I know Lars Ulrich has went on record as saying this is his least favorite album because they're angsty teenagers and it just wasn't their best quality. But in my opinion, this is the Metallica album I go back and listen to the most. Simply because I enjoy the production of it. I think that raw styling just made it better, and realistically they were on the top of their game. Dave Mustaine wrote a lot of the music to certain songs such as the Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire, and I can't remember every single one that he co-wrote. I think Phantom Lord maybe or something like that. And then you had a lot of the budding lyricship from James Hetfield that helped define Metallica's early sound to a T. The song Jump in the Fire is like the first Temptation song, as I call it, or the addiction song that would be featured on most Metallica albums, such as Sad But True, Master of Puppets, and the Judas Kiss, for example. Those are all what I call temptation songs because it's about drug abuse or something similar to that, some form of hold over you. Standout songs in the album would be Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Phantom Lord, Seek and Destroy, and Whiplash. Now we move on to Metallica's sophomore album, Ride the Lightning. This is another masterpiece. And this, where Metallica's Kill 'Em All taught the world about thrash metal, Ride the Lightning taught the world what thrash metal could really look like once they got their teeth cut, if that makes any sense. Once they grew a little bit more older, a little bit more wiser, and knew what they were doing. Cliff Burton's direction on this album really helped shape it. The musicianship is of even higher quality. You can tell these are guys that, despite being at a young age, I believe James Hetfield was 19 when he wrote the lyrics to Fade to Black, had some amazing talent within them. And then you hear the instrumental Call of Cthulhu, you hear the amazing design of certain instrumental sections, such as in Ride the Lightning, and one of my personal favorite songs of Metallica, Creeping Death. Again, the lyricship, it takes some of James's Bible theme stuff from like the Four Horsemen and improves it with Creeping Death. You get excellent depressing lyrics from Fade to Black, which it's incredible that a 19-year-old could write something that deep and that meaningful. Then you get just the traditional thrashers like Fight Fire with Fire, Trapped Under Ice, which are all great songs. Kirk Hammett added some impressive songwriting ability when he took the riffs from, I believe it was Impaler, was the song from Exodus. and added it to Trapped Under Ice and showed that he had some writing talent and that he wasn't just riding Dave Mustaine's coattails. It's a fantastic album, and it set the standard for quality. This was the one of the only, let's be honest, Metallica albums that had fantastic production. And almost every Metallica album afterward has suffered from either poor quality or something missing, some sort of problem, either overly long songs, uh, not enough being corralled in and being forced to stick to a certain pattern, whatever it is. This one, aside from one song on the album, Escape, which even Metallica can't stand, it's James Hetfield's least favorite song. Uh, the whole album is a start to finish perfect, and even Escape isn't that bad. It's just a poor quality song compared to the rest. And so it's a start to finish album that's perfect. And one of the very few records that you can honestly say, no matter how many times you hear, you never get over how great it sounds. Next, I'm going to do all the big four first. We have Slayer, Show No Mercy. This came out a couple months after Kill 'Em All, and where Kill 'Em All shows you what from a lyrical standpoint, metal could do with a fast-paced, energetic, upbeat sound. Show No Mercy shows what you can do with this demonic, super vicious, violent, razor-sharp musicianship. Tom Araya was working as a respiratory therapist and put up most of his own money just to make the album. And Kerry King and I can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head. I'm not good with names. But the whole band, let's just say Slayer in general, did some amazing work. In terms of writing, I would say that I've always said this before, Slayer don't write songs, they write albums. Because there's not exactly like with Metallica, I can shuffle play Metallica and always find a song I like. With Slayer, they make an album and there's not exactly like a single off that album other than stuff like Rain and Blood and Angel of Death and most of Season of the Abyss. That's the exception that really stand out on their own. They stand out as an album as whole. Songs like Face the Slayer, Bad Magic, and stuff like that are really good songs, but to me the whole album as a whole is fantastic. But it just, to me, picking out an individual song is a lot harder on a Slayer album for me. As much as I like this album, this was the album that pretty much got me into Slayer. I was very scared of listening to Slayer because I grew up in a very Christian household. And one day I saw Rain and Blood on vinyl on the store shelf, and I was a budding vinyl collector, so I snagged it up. Didn't want my mom or anyone to know. Listened to it and fell in love, and I quickly went back and picked up the rest of their albums, and I've been a massive fan ever since. As much as I love Rain and Blood, and I think of it as a masterpiece in any regard of musicianship, Show No Mercy is really good. Early Slayer is not nothing to trifle with. A lot of people don't seem to like early Slayer until 86 and onward, but they had some really good sound, but it was much more raw. Tom Araya's vocals wasn't as strong. It was more just him screaming into the microphone. And sometimes the lyrics and stuff weren't as lyrically strong as Kerry King's later writing would be. But it's still a great album, and it essentially started extreme metal along with bands like Venom and Hellhammer and stuff like that. So it's an influential album in terms of this paved the way for death metal. And so I would rank it as A tier. Next we have, if I can find it, Haunting the Chapel. This was a 4-song EP done by Slayer as a follow-up to Show No Mercy from Metal Blade. It's a solid 4 songs. It's like Metallica's Death Magnetic. I guess it was just songs that were cut from Show No Mercy pretty much, or just recorded very quickly. I believe the first song's called Chemical Warfare or Chemical something. It's a really good song. The whole 4 songs are solid. There's nothing to complain about, but there's not really anything that stands out. I can see why it was its own EP instead of a full album focusing around those 4 songs. So it's a B tier album in my opinion, or EP I should say. Next we get to Hell Awaits. This was the follow-up to Show No Mercy, and just like Ride the Lightning, in production is improved. I believe they signed on with a different label at this point in their career. Songs like Necrophiliac was one of the first shocking Slayer songs in my opinion. Like Angel of Death offended a lot of people, and then later they'd write songs like, I believe it's pronounced Jihad, and then God Hates Us All, or Disciple. I always just call the song God Hates Us All because that's the main lyric. But Slayer's always been good about offending people. Tom Araya once said, and he's a Christian like me, he's Catholic. God Hates Nobody, it's just a title for the album, and he doesn't get offended, and so neither do I. At the lyrics, it's Kerry King is the atheist of the group, and he looks at the lyrics of the album, and he just looks back at Kerry and says, "You're going to really annoy the hell out of him with this one," or something to that extent. And I have to agree, some of the writing is almost completely demented, and that kind of set the standard for what Slayer's image was. To this day, when I think of early Slayer, I think of the song Necrophiliac. It's just such a standout, very creepy song. And if you listen to early death metal, such as Cannibal Corpse, some of their songs like I Come Blood and stuff like that really came, pardon the expression, from Slayer. And you could see it, and so this album is even more important than Show No Mercy, because in my opinion, you wouldn't have death metal if you didn't have Hell Awaits. Next, we have, I'm going to hold off on Anthrax, Megadeth, Killing Is My Business. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. If you don't know the story, Dave Mustaine, the lead singer and guitar player for Megadeth, was originally a member of Metallica. Most people know that. When he was fired from the band a month before Kill 'Em All was to release, or to be recorded, he swore vengeance, and that is what Killing Is My Business is. It is raw, angry revenge, pure and simple. Every song that Metallica put out, you could tell Dave Mustaine listened to and said, I'm going to play that thing, I'm going to play it harder, I'm going to play it fucking faster. And that's what he does. It is incredible. The way, it's almost like you can just see the man's fingers bleeding at times. The way that they just really go hard on these songs. Everything is faster. The production wasn't super great. And you gotta remember, this was 84 at this point. Metallica just made Ride the Lightning, or was in the process of it. And then Megadeth's album kind of doesn't sound as good. That's because, if I'm not mistaken, Dave Mustaine and them blew the budget on drugs. But despite the production issues, it's still an incredibly solid album. The song The Mechanics was the original version of The Four Horsemen. And you can just really feel that need to play that song harder, faster, and stronger than The Four Horsemen. And in my opinion, it is the better song. I like the lyrics better to The Four Horsemen. But you can't deny that the musicianship behind that album is incredibly strong. And Dave Ellefson is a fantastic bassist, and he sort of set the standard for how bassists should sound, and kind of should have made Metallica take a look at how he was doing it. You could tell Megadeth took what Slayer did, Megadeth looked at what Metallica did and used it to shape what they were going to do next. If Metallica fires back with Ride the Lightning, they're going to fire back with something even stronger. They're going to come back with Peace Sells. And that's how they did, but Metallica never really seemed to learn from Megadeth, which was sort of the sad thing, because I'm more of a Megadeth fan, or at least the first thrash metal band I heard was Megadeth. So they always have a special place in my heart. So in my opinion, this is a masterpiece of what became of the genre, that lightning fast speed. A lot of modern thrash bands or more modern albums, such as like Exodus and Testament's later works, you can tell were kind of shaped by the sound of this album, or at least they sound that way. Uh, Faster singing, faster playing, everything's got to be faster. Whereas Metallica have stayed around that mid-tempo sound. Megadeth haven't slowed down to this day, and that's what makes them even more impressive. They're still thrashing, while Metallica is trying to get back to that sound, but still make a more polished production of it. Okay, now let's get on to Anthrax. And now this is the first controversial. Uh, this is the first controversial opinion. Anthrax is fistful of metal. S tier. It's a masterpiece. Most people don't like Neil Turbin, the original vocalist for Anthrax. I personally think he was the best vocalist. Joey Belladonna, while a fantastic and talented vocalist, is a bit stock. He's just an average frontman. There's nothing particularly incredible about his vocal ability or about his singing. He's not like James Hetfield with that signature voice that sort of set the standard for what metal should sound like or what thrash should sound like. He doesn't have a very interesting voice like Dave Mustaine with that kind of cartoony sound. He doesn't have the harsh grit and anger that Tom Araya has. He just sings, and that kind of made it weaker in my opinion. I've never thought Anthrax should be part of the Big Four. I've always thought if they'd stuck with Neil Turbin, they would have been the better band, because Neil Turbin has the ability to do a head voice scream. Just go straight from his head voice into his singing and screaming, and it was a massive talent in my opinion that was underutilized. If I'm not mistaken, after a gig with Metallica, some guy, I think it was a producer or something from a record company, told Scotty Ian to kick Turbin, and then that caused Dan Leiker to get kicked because he liked Turbin. So that caused two very talented people to get kicked out of Anthrax because of one person's opinion. But the reason, aside from the fact I just really like Neil Turbin's vocals, that this is a masterpiece, is Kerrang! Magazine, when reviewing the album, the second track on the album, Metal Thrashing Mad, is the song that created what Kerrang! Would coin the phrase thrash metal. So this is influential, not just because I like it, but solely for the fact that the name thrash metal comes from this album from 1984. Is it a perfect album? No. I find Alice Cooper's cover of I'm 18 to be kind of neither here nor there. Megadeth would do quite like 2 or 3 Alice Cooper songs, and I think they did them better. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's just an average song, and the whole album, aside from Death Rider and Metal Thrashing Mad, is sort of stock. Howling Furies is okay, but there's not really nothing special. It's just it's kind of like some of these other albums we'll get to here in a minute. It's just sort of okay. But to me, the vocal style is like a mixture of Judas Priest, and it really stands out, and I really enjoy the styling of the vocals. Now we'll get on to Anthrax's Spreading the Disease. To me, this is a B-tier album. This was their first album with Joey Belladonna, and it created some more popular songs from the band, such as Gung Ho and Air. But to me, there was just nothing really special about the album. Madhouse is an okay song. The entire album has okay production. It's alright. It's just nothing special. Like I said, Joey Belladonna just never did it for me as a singer. He never had that, sound that you could just recognize it. I recognize Paul Bailoff when I hear Exodus. I recognize Blitz when I hear Overkill. You just sort of recognize certain singers by their style, and there's just nothing to recognize. Uh, and so to me, it's B tier. Realistically, I'd almost dare to say it's C tier. In fact, I will say it's C tier. There's just nothing special about it. It's not got really anything super important to it to make it stand out. It's just nothing but an average thrash metal album. Now we're finally into the Big Eight territory now. Personally, this is the band I felt should have taken the place of Anthrax in the Big Four. Exodus, Bonded by Blood. Of all the debut albums you're seeing here, which all of these, minus a couple, are debuts. Some are follow-up albums. Heck, Venom's on their fourth album with Possessed on this tier list by 83. I'm including their first two albums from 81 just to sort of give them a place on here because technically Thrash started in 83, so they're the exception as the first couple of Venom albums. We'll get to them in a minute. Exodus is Bonded in Blood. Did the same thing with... I'm not the biggest Paul Bailoff fan, but I will admit his vocal style is at least something you can recognize. And this was a band that had tremendous talent. Kirk Hammett left Exodus to join Metallica, but Gary Holt took his place and did a fantastic job. Gary Holt is one of my favorite guitar heroes. The musicianship between him and Rick, I believe his name is Hunolt. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It was fantastic. The drumming from Tom Huntington, is fantastic. The production is of higher quality for a debut album than any of the Big Four combined for their debut album. This was delayed by a year. People say that the reason it was delayed is what caused Exodus to not be known as the Big Four, which I feel still this album sounds better. You know, it's not about... The reason people say Anthrax is in the Big Four is because Among the Living sold well. But to me, you know, it's not about sales, it's about how good they sound. And while the other Big Four have managed to at least make thrash metal into what it is, and you can see that they led the charge, Anthrax just sort of rode on the others' coattails. Songs like Piranha, Exodus, and of course the title track Bonded in Blood are fantastic. Like I said, good production, good vocals. The lyrics aren't exactly going to make you cry or going to make you really think about how amazing they are. It's not Metallica, it's not Megadeth level writing. It's solid, but it's a really, really solid. You don't have to be the best. You just got to play the best, in my opinion. You know, you can take a bunch of average players and together make them into the best, if that makes any sense. And to me, this took a group of ragtags that were kind of just thrown together at the last minute and made something incredible with it. It's a shame that we never did get to see a second album with Bailoff to maybe see if he honed his vocals and got better, but I do prefer Zetro instead. We're going to go through these others a lot faster. I'm just talking about the ones I know the best. Now we get to Overkill, Feel the Fire, I'm sorry. Overkill was another band that easily could have taken Anthrax's place as the original Big Four of thrash. Feel the Fire is an amazingly solid album, and for a debut, it's got very good production as well. Blitz's vocals are a little shaky in the first two albums compared to his later work, but the vocals are still really good. Anthrax is considered the first East Coast thrash metal band to make it big, but realistically, New Jersey had Overkill first. The only problem is they took a long time to put an album out, which kind of hurt them. But still incredibly solid and a really good album. I'd say these S-tier albums are all... If you're looking to get into thrash metal, this is where you start right here with this top row. These are all really great, and then work your way down. Now, before I forget, because this is technically what I call an extension of the Big Four, Sod. Speak English or Die. SOD stands for Stormtroopers of Death, but in case you're wondering, this is one of the first credited crossover thrash albums. By that, it's a combination of like punk and hardcore with the thrash metal sound. To me, it's solid. I like it, but it's not really nothing that stands out to me. I'm not a big crossover thrash fan. To me, I like it pure. Uh, and you'll see that here in a minute when I get to another band on this list. But to me, it's a solid album. It's one of the best of the crossovers. Nothing particularly great about it, nothing particularly bad. But it does stand out because it does have some great players on it. Scott Ian on guitar, Dan Liker on bass. You got a really solid lineup to make a really solid album that manages to, in my opinion, be better than anything Anthrax put out after '84. This was recorded, they had spare recording time during the recording of Spreading the Disease, so Scott Ian called in Dan Liker and a couple others to make an album for fun. And how often nowadays do you see a bunch of guys just get together to make an album for fun with leftover recording time? I mean, it's almost unheard of. So I appreciate what it was and what it did. Now we get to Metal Church. I'm not really a big fan of Metal Church. I think they're incredibly solid. I know some people really like them, but to me, they're neither here nor there. The debut album is solid. I really like the front cover work. Very simple, but very cool at the same time. But really, it's not an album that I listen to all the time. It's okay. All of Metal Church is just okay. That's why they never really made it very popular like the Big Four or many other of these bands on this list, just because everything is kind of stock, or at least it sounds stock compared to everything else, I should say. Now we get to Exciter, Heavy Metal Maniac. This is an extremely solid album. One of my personal favorites. Let me check the recording real quick. Everything's still going. It's not really got the greatest vocals. It's not really got the greatest musicianship. It's not even really thrash metal. It's more speed metal. But you know what makes this album important? Is it came out like a month or two before Kill 'Em All. And it has a lot of DNA in it of thrash metal. So this is like a precursor to thrash along with Venom. So it's incredible just how much this one album that not many people know about, not many people care about, seemed to help build a genre. And it's really cool. Most of Exciter's albums are really good. Nothing perfect, nothing. I realistically say I don't care for the vocals. The vocals are C tier. But the musicianship is really good. The songs are decent. And like I said, this album is influential for a reason. It helped create this whole genre. Next, we have Suicidal Tendencies' debut self-titled album. This is another crossover thrash band, but I can tolerate this one better than most crossover bands. Nothing super special, nothing unspecial about it. It's not really thrash, it's more punkish than it is anything else, but their later albums, I think it was their second or third album, is definitely thrash, so they deserve the spot. It's a solid album. There's nothing to complain about. There's nothing to hate, really. Now we move on to Possessed, Seven Churches. I'm not a big Possessed fan. To me, they sound okay, and they helped invent black metal, death metal, and thrash metal, because if I'm not mistaken, Seven Churches came out in late 82, early 83. So again, sort of a precursor to Kill 'Em All. But to me, it's just nothing here nor there. This helped build death metal and black metal alongside Venom, and so it's influential, and so almost I feel like it should be at A, but to me, this is my tier list. I think it's alright. Again, it's kind of like Metal Church. I just don't really listen to it all that much. They did like 2 albums and then called it quits until like 2008 or 2009. Did one last album, which was really solid. It's actually my favorite Possessed album. And then that's it. Now we move on to Venom. I'm going to start kind of out of order here. Black Metal. Black Metal is a really solid album. It gave black metal its name. It's sort of another precursor to thrash metal. The title track is extremely solid, but I personally don't really care for the album all that much. Uh, if I'm going to be honest, I'm actually going to move it and Venom down to, or Possessed, I should say, down to C tier. Uh, they're alright, but they're not really thrash metal, and they're solid. Uh, Venom's debut album, I just really didn't care for. It's a D tier. It's alright, there's nothing special about it. I think the song Satan's Army or The Battle of Satan or something like that is okay, and a couple other songs, but there's nothing stand out. I can barely remember the names. Possessed, fourth album, or sorry, it's confusing because of the names. Venom has an album called Possessed, and then there's a band called Possessed on my list, so forgive my confusion. Venom's fourth album, Possessed, is, in my opinion, one of the stronger albums because it's got a lot more thrash influence to it, and it sounds heavier, but while there's more songs on this I like, I still don't really care for it all that much. I don't really listen to Venom at all. Uh, I'll occasionally pull them out and I'll listen to black metal, think, this is alright, and I'll jam to it, but then don't really think about it again. Then their second album, which I can't remember the name of, and it's in such small print I can't read it, I find to be D tier. I just don't really care for it. I will say the song At War with Satan is an interesting song because it's a 19-minute and 52-second song. 20-minute song. The longest Metallica song is Emerata from the new album, or I hope I'm pronouncing that right, 72 Seasons. And it's 11 minutes long. So this is even longer than Metallica songs, which, let's be honest, especially once you get around Master of Puppets and Injustice for All, the songs start to drag a little bit. And boy, that's a long song. I don't know how anyone could have their attention to listen to that all the way through. Now we get to Hellhammer. This is a band that helped create death metal. It helped create black metal. It helped create thrash metal. But they never released an album. They released 3 EPs, Demonic Rites, and I can't remember these other two's names, and I can't read them. You can't find any of this on Spotify, these demos, but they came out in '83, all 3 of these demos. And in 1984, they came out with an EP. I can't remember the name of it. I've not really listened to them that much. I listened to them just before recording this video. The quality of these demos is terrible, but it's a demo. You can find them on YouTube. There's some solid musicianship in there. When you can make out the riffs, because these were on cassette tapes, these demos, and somebody just uploaded them from an original cassette. The quality is shit, and you can tell that. But if you listen close enough, you can hear some really solid riffs and some good chugging that kind of comes from more of a modern sounding thrash metal band than 1983. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the lead singer from this band would go on to form Celtic Frost, which is probably what they're more known for. But to me, nothing great about these albums, nothing bad. They are technically influential, as most of these albums are, but there's nothing really great about them, nothing really bad about them. Next we have Creators. I can't remember, Endless Pain or something like that is what this album's called. I was listening to Pleasure to Kill just last night, and I was thinking, gee, that's a great first album. And then I realized, wait a second, that was their second album. And I'd say Pain is a really solid album. It's just not my favorite. Pleasure to Kill from '86 is just so much more powerful and raw, and helped create death metal and stuff just as much as any of these other albums on this list. It's amazing that you can take 3 drunk, angry teenagers and make them make such cool music. It sort of sounds like Metallica's Kill 'Em All, in terms of you can tell there's a lot of talent there. It just needed honing. And on their second album, you get that. So while it's a decent album, again, compared to its sequel or successor, I should say, it's not really that great. I don't even remember what this album is called. Let's see if I can pull it up on my phone because it's just a picture. Just bear with me for a second here. I don't see it and I don't know what it is, so I'm just going to automatically put it at D tier. Anyone who knows what this is, you're. Oh, this is Sodom, I think, isn't it? Let me check real quick. No, it's not Sodom. Not Destruction. Not Sacrifice. Maybe Dark Angel? I believe that is Dark Angel. Either way, it's going at B tier. Their second, if that is Dark Angel, Darkness Descends is a much better album. I don't even remember. I just listened to these, all of them, in the last 2 days preparing for this tier list. I kind of knew where everything was going already, but listening to it, all I can think of is Darkness Descends. I can't. If that is Dark Angel, I don't even remember it. Next we have Sabotage. This is more of a power metal band, but this EP, I can't remember, Into the Dungeon or something like that, is actually really solid and has some thrash influence to it. It's not really that great. It's not really that bad. Uh, I like them better as a power metal band. I find their follow up, their actual first full length album, I think, Sirens, to be kind of shit. I just didn't like it. The title track wasn't really that great to me, and I couldn't even finish the album. I just didn't really like it. Wasn't gelling with me. Now we get to DRI. I know this was another first crossover album, and a lot of people might like it, but to me, both of the DRI albums from '84 to '85, if I'm not mistaken, are just not my cup of tea. DRI's self-titled album uh, is all right. I mean, to me, if you like that punk stuff, which I'm not really into punk, I guess it sounds good. The opening song, I think it's called DRI as well, or something like that. Is about a minute long, and it's so fast in terms of what the singer is singing. I can't make out a single word, and it's not like fast as in, you know, Tom Araya singing on God Hates Us All, not taking a breath, or Jihad. It's just fast, as in he's talking so fast like this, I can't understand a single word he's saying. And I don't really care for that kind of vocal style too much. Next, we move on to Razor's first two albums. Executioner's Calling, I think is what it's called, and Outlaw Justice or something like that. I can't remember the name of their second album. I find the second album not to be as good as their debut album. I'd say they're both B tier, or I'm sorry, C tier. Nothing particularly great about either one. Uh, Violent Restitution is the best album that band came out with, and I would easily put it at A tier. But this is their first two albums, and they're solid, but there's nothing great about them. Now we move on to Voivod. Voivod, I think is how you pronounce that. I've never been good at pronouncing that name. Uh, I almost want to say this is C tier, but I quite liked it. I was just listening to it literally just before recording this, and I quite liked it. Uh, I'm not really a big fan of theirs. I don't listen to a lot of their music. Uh, But I will say I did really like this album. Uh, War and Pain is what the title is. Uh, the song Voivod and Warriors of Ice are both really good songs. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, War and Pain and Condemned to the Gallows are really good songs too. So I would honestly rate this about B tier. I quite liked it. And next we have either called Chemicals of Corrosion or Cause of Corrosion. To me, it's a C tier album. I listened to it earlier today, and it's just a generic thrash album. It's not really nothing great. If I had to, let me put it this way: the way I'm rating these, as a vinyl collector, I spend a lot of money collecting vinyls. Uh, it ranges. Sometimes an album will be about on average $40. Sometimes they'll be a little cheaper. I got both Power Trip albums, $13 a piece. Uh, I got Sod for 24ish. Uh, it just sort of depends on the album and how easily you can haggle and stuff. Uh, if I was going to spend my own money on these albums, not listening through a streaming service, say I went into a record shop to pick up the vinyl, I would spend my money easily on all of these on the S tier. I have all of these on vinyl, uh, and I love them. I would spend my money on Slayer definitely, and if I had the extra money, of course, I'd pick up Exciter and Sod, and then I'd work my way down the rest of these. I would definitely buy Metal Church, Suicidal Tendencies, Creator, Voivod, and the rest of the Slayer album, the EP. But anything C tier and below, unless they were heavily discounted or I just had some extra money, and buy three get one 70% off or something like that, I wouldn't bother picking up any of these. Uh, they don't do it for me, and they're not my cup of tea. I might pick up Anthrax because at least I know who they are, and I know that it's okay. It's the only album here that is in the C tier that I'd say I'd buy, uh, instead of just listen to on stream pretty much. So that's my tier list. In fact, because I said that, I will move it up to B tier because it's average, but it's a from C to B tier. I almost could wish I could put a middle in between tier right there. Uh, because I'd buy it, I will put it at B tier. Everything C tier and D tier, I would not waste my money on. Or just like I said, I like Razor's later work. So say I'm collecting uh, Violent Restitution, I'm buying the rest of their albums. I'll pick up the first two. But to me, it's not a very interesting debut. So that's my thrash metal tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If I left out any bands, like I said, let me know. If I left out any albums from these bands, let me know. Uh, Tell me your own version of my tier list down below. How would you rate this tier list? What would you change? Uh, what opinions on any of these albums do you have? Uh, do you have any recommendations? Anything similar to this, more modern sounding or anything? Anything at all, just feel free to share. I just really wanted to do this. I thought it'd be fun, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoy listening to a lot of these albums and kind of trying to decide, how I would judge them. And I really, truly enjoyed doing this, and this was a lot of fun for me, and I hope it was for you guys too. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening.